Hi, my name is Debbie, and I'm currently tapering off of Klonopin. I think this is now my eighth or ninth video, although I haven't made one in about 6 weeks, which I will explain why here in just a moment. For those of you that are not familiar with me, my story and how I got here is on my very first video, which is Keys to Success. So if you're interested in my story, you can go back and take a look at it there. So I restarted my taper September 2nd. I had held for, oh gosh, about, I'm going to say 5 or 6 months because I had switched from Sandoz brand to Klonopin, and the switch was pretty tough. But then I was finally feeling really stable by the end of August. And I had done all kinds of things that I felt were really preparing me for the restart of my taper. I'd done some hypnosis, I'd done some EFT, I um, had some really good routines that I was doing every day, which I've talked about in some of my other videos. And so I just felt like I was really, really in a good place and was just all gung ho. And as usual, this process has a way of humbling you and never ceases to um, give me new insights into mistakes. And boy, did I make some big ones when I restarted my taper. So even though I'm looking pretty decent right now, I've actually lost about 9 pounds in the last month. And I was literally couch bound for about 2 weeks. I didn't work at all for a month, and it's really only been, I'm going to say, the last maybe 2 weeks where I've been able to go back to my gift shop and work 1 or 2 days a week. And even then, only for like 3 or 4 hours a day before I'm just absolutely wiped out. So I am crawling out of the unbelievably wretched, horrible physical and mental hell that I thrust myself into. Um, but again, I'm getting better. So I'm so grateful for that because as many of you know, when you are in that deep, dark black hole, it's so easy to go, holy shit, I'm always going to feel this way. Oh my God, I'm permanently damaged. Oh my God, this is just never going to end. And I was in that place for weeks. It was bad. Plus, the whole ordeal had been so traumatic on my body that my blood pressure shot way out of control. Um, and I had to be put on beta blockers to get my blood pressure back down, which it is pretty much back to normal. And I am going to talk a little bit about beta blockers here in a little bit. So, for those of you that were familiar with my nice, wonderful visual that I had created um, to, kind of commemorate and mark my progress through my taper. The last video, I was all the way up to pitch 4, um, and now I'm not even at base camp anymore. I'm like way back, not even on the trail heading up there. So, and I'll explain that in a minute too. Anyway, so yeah, I made some crucial mistakes, and I was really angry and depressed about those mistakes for quite a while. And then it's just like everything in this process, it comes down to attitude sometimes. I mean, that's all there is. And I finally had to start looking at it as these are mistakes that I won't make again. I learned a lot, and hopefully, by sharing them, I can help other people not make the same mistakes. So, I'm trying to look on the bright side of this now that I don't feel like I'm dying anymore. Anyway, so basically, what I did is when I restarted my taper, I'm doing a water titration. I, number one, I changed the formulation. Um, Prior, I was using like 300 mils of water to one pill, and then I switched it to 150 mils and I just redid that whole thing with my four little doses a day. And then I, instead of going from what I had done before successfully, which was making one small cut a week and then holding, I decided to do a daily micro taper, which ended up to not actually being micro, but again, I'll get to that in a second. So I switched the formulation. I switched the way that I was tapering. And then probably the biggest mistake I made was that I grossly miscalculated my cuts. Now, I should know by now that I have lost like 50 IQ points since this whole process began. And I should know how crucial it is to check and double check and triple check and quadruple check my math. And I didn't do that because I think part of it was, I went into it overconfident, and I also went into it with something that I think we all fall prey to, which is we are just so freaking ass sick of this process. We just want to be done. And I think somewhere in my mind, it was like, you know what? I am just going to power through this, and I'm going to somehow mentally will my way through this, and that doesn't work because, yeah, the mind is incredibly powerful. And I talk about that in my other videos. And words are powerful, and our thoughts are powerful. Um, and I do believe that our thoughts and our words really, really do affect us physically, but there's still the component that what we're going through is really physical. It's not in our head, and it's not something that we, I think, can just will away. Um, so anyway, trying to not make this a big, long, drawn out thing. Basically, what ended up happening was that I was really cutting twice as much or more than I thought I was. And so, literally within about a 9-day period, um, I ended up cutting like 20, 25%, which in hindsight, I'm like, holy shit, how in God's name did that happen? I mean, it's almost like some evil entity like took over my body and did this. Anyway, so I did start feeling it after about 2 weeks, and all I can say is thank God I stopped cutting. Um, because even though I can't imagine it being worse than it was, it could have been a lot worse, I guess. Anyway, so I stopped, and then I just kept going downhill for, gosh, probably about another 2 weeks. And I had read on other blogs and forums about this thing called lag time, which I had not really paid attention to, um, but now I totally and completely understand it. And basically, the premise of it is that, when you make cuts, and the nature of these drugs is that, yeah, you might feel something the first day or the first few days, but it really takes time um, for your system to really fully feel the effects of cuts. And the consensus seems to be it's about a 3-week lag time. And I would say that that's pretty accurate. And I think the reason that I didn't notice that previous is because I was only making one small cut a week, and then holding, and a cut a week and then holding. And so then I think that probably was some of that lag time showing up, but I think I didn't really notice it as much as cutting every day and then all of a sudden, boom. And so, yeah, when it hit me like um, a supersonic freaking freight train um, from the fifth ring of hell. I can't even stress the horrific physical and mental anguish that I went through for 3 days. It was, I mean, I've had times where I thought it was bad, but this was just on a whole other completely different level. That was frightening and absolutely debilitating. I have a whole new appreciation for people that have cold turkey. I can't even begin to imagine how anybody survives that. And I know that I'm a strong person, but I don't think that I could even remotely survive that. I mean, maybe I could. I don't ever want to find out. Let's put it that way. Um, and so, yeah, after 3 days, I went right back to the dose that I was at when I started my when I started tapering again, September 2nd. And then, like 4 days later, I just started like updosing because I mean, it was just so awful. It was so awful. I mean, I couldn't stand it. And I know that there's a lot of debate on different forums and blogs on updosing, and at the end of the day, I just didn't give a shit. All I cared about was just getting stable again. And so I ended up updosing quite a bit. I'm almost ashamed to say how much I updosed. But, you know, I if I'm going to be honest and useful to anybody, I mean, I updosed almost 20%. And even at that, I'm probably about 5 weeks from the initial hellish 3 days, and I'm still feeling pretty crappy. Um, Mega, mega better, but I mean, I'm still not what I would call stable at all by a long shot. But I'm on the upswing, and I'm so grateful for that. So, again, I was just super depressed and really angry at myself about what I did. And I just have to accept that it is what it is. And, that's one of the biggest hurdles in this process is acceptance. Um, Acceptance that it happened to us, that it sucks, that it's unfair, that it's frustrating, that there seems to be so little control. Um, but the things that we can control are big ones. Again, the diet, and the attitude, and doing those extra things, at least for me, that do make a difference. And um, so I think for me, the big takeaway from this experience is that it's going to take as long as it's going to take. And I had a system that was working, and I got overconfident. I got sick of the process, the time it was taking, and I wavered from that. And I won't do that again. It's going to take what it's going to take. And I don't give a shit anymore, because before I was functional, and I just want to get back to that place. And again, you know what? If it takes me another 2 or 3 years, I do not give a shit, because I can manage that. I can't manage what I just went through. And I had some wonderful people, wonderful supportive people the last 6 weeks. One of which sent me some links to some blogs on slow tapering. And, there just seems to be this weird stigma about tapering slow, like, somehow we're weak or it's wrong or we shouldn't. And I just don't even get that. I mean, who gives a shit? If all you can do is 2 or 3 or 4% a month, but you can remain functional and hold down a life and take care of your family and your kids and your job, so what? Who gives a shit? Now I realize we don't all have doctors that support that. But my suggestion would be, well, do everything you can to find one that will. And again, I'm really super lucky that I have a doctor that will support me, and especially now that she's seen what happens when I try to cut too much. Another thing that I want to add to this, and I don't want to cast blame, but before I started my taper, I was in my doctor's office and I had told my doctor that I decided I also wanted to do some counseling in conjunction with restarting my taper, just because I thought it would be another support system for me, someplace that I could go, once a week and just vent and talk about my experience. Because again, for me, my friends and family are sick of hearing about it. I'm sick of talking to them about it. I feel like I have to live in secret. You guys all know what I'm talking about. And so I felt like this was just another component that I could add, another thing that I could add to my toolbox. Well, so what she did is she sent in the gal in the office that is kind of the head of all the counselors in their clinic. And um, the first thing she said to me when she came in was, so, I see that you're barely on a sliver of your medication, and you realize that I could just give you a placebo and you wouldn't even know the difference. And I felt incredibly bullied, and she was horribly dismissive, um, which, I felt like, wow, isn't that kind of like the first rule of counseling is to never be dismissive to a patient, but whatever. Um, and so part of me felt like, well, okay, well, maybe she is right, maybe I shouldn't just completely discount that. And so I allowed myself to buy into it instead of trusting my body and myself. Um, and two, I mean, she just bullied me, and I allowed that to happen. So I learned a really good lesson from that, which is don't give your power away. You're the one that's going through this experience. You know what's best for you. You know what you can and cannot take. Um, I did have a conversation with her a couple weeks ago. I was in there in the throes of misery, so she got to witness that. And and I did talk to her about that first meeting that we had, and she was very, very apologetic. I mean, at first she was like, "I didn't say that," and I'm like, "No, you did." Seared into my mind. Anyway, so, maybe it was good for her too to, take a look at maybe educating herself a little bit on benzo withdrawal. And in fact, Lisa Ling, This Is Life, that did the documentary on the benzo crisis, I actually sent that to her, and I think that was pretty enlightening to her. Anyway, so she did hook me up with the counselor that I've been seeing for a couple of weeks. That's fabulous. And so I think that that's going to be a really, really, really good tool for me. And again, a really good outlet in terms of just a place to go and talk about, what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, and someone that can support me. So anyway, the only two other things that I want to share in this video, and I'm going to put links in the description below, is there were two things that I found, or that God gifted me with the first few weeks of the crisis. One of them is it's a 30-minute breathing routine, and it's by a gentleman. His name is Max Strom, and he has a lot of videos on YouTube about breath work. And I was already kind of familiar with it. I was kind of dabbling in it, and I just somehow, through the grace of God, came across this 30-minute routine. So um, it's it kind of incorporates like a little bit of I don't know, Tai Chi or Qigong, but it's mostly breath work, and it literally calms your central nervous system. It seems like initially it might stimulate it, but it really doesn't. It really, really calms it down. And holy shit, was that a lifesaver for me. And I do it every day now. And I'm so grateful that I found that. The second thing that I came across is something called yoga nidra, and I did a lot of that the first couple of weeks. And because, again, a lot of you know, I've got a little Kindle and earphones and an eye mask. And I spent a lot of time that first couple of weeks in my bed in the dark, doing yoga nidra. And it's a meditation that's incredibly good at distracting you from all of the awful things that you are feeling in your body and thinking in your head. And there's one that specifically, it says addiction, and we all know we're not addicts, we're physically dependent, but it's still really useful. And then there's just some other ones on sleeping and healing. So any of them are good, any of them. But I'll go ahead and post a link to a couple of them here. So, oh, and then the last thing that I wanted to quickly talk about is, so yeah, she put me on some beta blockers because my blood pressure was so high. Well, because I am like phobic now of putting anything in my body. Before I ever even put one of these in my body, I got online and did like massive research to make sure that I was not going to be taking anything that might even remotely be cause any kind of dependence or withdrawal, or funky symptoms, because like I had enough. I will say initially she prescribed me something that starts with the CH, and I don't remember the name of it now. And I did come home, I researched that, saw a lot of bad shit about it. Um, Called her up and said, not taking that. What's our other option? And she said, beta blockers. And this one's called propranolol, Propranolol, which I researched and saw a lot of good stuff. And on top of that, come to find that a lot of doctors will prescribe beta blockers for anxiety, even though it's not touted as something for anxiety. Um, Doctors will prescribe it for that. And basically, what it does is it blocks those adrenaline rushes. So now, look, if you already have low blood pressure or low heart rate, not a good idea to take these. But it's still something that you might consider, because it helped a lot in terms of just taking the edge off of that intense anxiety that I was going through. So I didn't start out taking a whole pill, because again, even if I read everything and it looks copacetic, it's still like, no, I'm starting out with a tiny bit. So I was only doing a quarter of a pill. And for probably about 2 weeks, I did a quarter pill 3 times a day. And I really, really think it got me through like the worst of it. Um, so now I'm not really taking them anymore because I don't really feel like I need to. But the thing is, I know that if I'm feeling especially anxious, that I can take like a quarter pill and it will help take that edge off. So that's really nice. And at least according to everything I read, there does not seem to be um, any addiction, dependency, or anything like that. But don't take my word for it. I'm not a doctor. Don't all be running out going, well, Debbie said, because I'm again not a doctor. But again, it's just something to think about or consider. So that's it. Here I am. I'm still alive. Yay! And I'm on the upswing. And so, to all of you out there, I hope that you are all doing well. And again, if nothing else, I hope my experience um, maybe helps someone else from making the same kind of mistakes. And again, all I can emphasize is to just trust your body and take it slow and find as many tools as you possibly can. So I'm not going to restart my taper again for probably a couple months. I'll know it when I'm ready. And I will start very slow and very patiently. So, again, I just wish all of you joy and peace and healing and big, huge hugs. Stay strong. We are going to get through this shit, and our life is going to be awesome. Thanks. Have a great day.